What's going on, people? Mr. CMD in the house. Check it out. If you want a woofer from a major manufacturer like Sundown or SoundCubed, FI, Digital Designs, any of the major players in the game, and this woofer's blown, all you've got to do, call them, order a recon, drop it in, you're good to go. But what about people that, have motors laying around or frames or parts, and you want to try setting up and building a woofer yourself? It's not hard to do. I'm getting ready to do it. You're going to get to watch. Now, there is some technical info I'm going to share with you before I start. These are things you need to know, so stay tuned. Alright, people, if you're going to take on this project, here's some things you need to know. I got a drawing here, a cutaway motor, basically, and a voice coil. Y'all bear with me, I'm not Picasso. Alright, what you need to know, this is your center pole. You need to know the diameter of it. The hole in the top plate, you need to know the diameter of that. The thickness of the top plate, you need to know that. The coil gap from top to bottom, you need to know that. And if you want to figure out your measurement for your bottom plate, you can do that as well. Okay, in my case, this particular motor, the center pole diameter from end to end, 2.934 inches. The inner diameter of the hole in the top plate is 3.370 inches. Okay. The top plate here is a 1/2 inch thick, 500 thousandths. The ferrites, they're 750 thousandths thick a piece, or 3/4 of an inch. There's 3 of those stacked for a total of 2.25 inches. And then the bottom plate, which is 0.571 inches, just over a 1/2 inch. Okay. The voice coil I'm using, it's a 4-layer aluminum flat wound coil. It has a former length of 4 inch 200 thousandths and a winding length of 2 inches. Okay. Now, with that said, here's what we can establish. I have a magnetic gap of a 1/2 inch thick right here. Here's your magnetic gap, not down here, right here at the top plate. This is where the magnetic force is introduced to the coil. Okay, we have a winding height on the coil of 2 inches. What you want to do is set this thing up with the very center of this coil winding in line with the very center of the magnetic gap right here. Now, to do that, take your coil height, which is 2 inches in my case, subtract the thickness of the top plate, which is a 1/2 inch, you're left with 1.5 inches. Now, you want even amounts of coil sticking above and below, which will center it in the gap. Now, with that said, you take that 1.5 inch number and you you divide that number by 2, and you're left with 750 thousandths, or 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to have 3/4 of an inch of that coil sticking above, and 3/4 of an inch of coil sticking below this magnetic gap while the woofer's resting. Okay? Now, with that established, we can figure out X max. Got a 2 inch wind height and an overhang of 750 thousandths, 3/4 of an inch of coil both ways. 750 from 2 leaves you with 1.25 inches right here. So we've got a mechanical X max basically of 1.25 inches, or almost 32 millimeters. Which means at 1.25 inches, past that, the coil comes out of the gap, and you don't want that. Now, take into consideration, I've got a depth of this coil gap right here. I've got a depth of 3.321, and a max, X max of 1.25. Now, if you subtract the two, or if you subtract this number from this one, you're left with just over 2 inches of clearance beneath that coil at full X max. So I will never ever have to worry about the voice coil hitting the bottom of the plate ever. It'll leave the gap before it hits the plate. Now, the woofer is going to be set up for 1500 RMS, and that's what we're going to run on it. So I don't look for it to do 31 or 32 millimeters of X max in the first place. so I'm safe. But keep in mind, if you buy a coil for this motor with a winding height that's too long, it's going to hit the bottom of the motor prematurely before it can reach its linear. Now, if you buy a coil with a winding height that's too short, it's going to leave the gap soon or early, and you don't want that either. So these are things to consider when picking parts. And if you can figure this out, you can build a woofer. So let's do that. Alright y'all, let's talk about woofer parts. We have the frame, we have the motor, spiders for the suspension, 3-inch voice coil, the cone, and of course the dust cap. I don't have the dust caps yet. They'll be here within a few days. Alright, the tools you're going to need. Number one, necessary tools to put the screws in the basket. In my case here, I've got Allen screws here. And it's also a good idea to apply a little epoxy to it before you screw the basket down. And that'll ensure that just in case the screws fail or back out, that the motor won't fall off. These are dial calipers. I use this to set the depth of the coil. Very precision. Problem with this particular one, these are steel and they like to stick to that damn motor, and they can be a pain in the ass. But I can deal with that. They do make these in plastic. You can buy them and they're just as precision, and you won't have to deal with that crap. Alright, I've got some cutters for the tensile leads, some good 3-part epoxy, masking tape, shims. This is a nylon clamp ring that I use to clamp the spiders down. This is an MDF ring I made to clamp the surround down. And you'll also need a few clamps. So, with that said, I believe we can get started. Let's do this. Alright guys, first order of business, I'm going to get the coil positioned in that gap. This is why I like these shims right here. Slide down into place. Get it positioned correctly. Slide it down in the gap. Take your second shim. If you're going to do it this way, put these gaps across from each other. And number 3. Well, let me get it in there. There. Now, because of the thickness being consistent, it applies even pressure all the way around the former, making sure not only that it stays perfectly round, but it stays perfectly centered. And with the pressure applied, I lift this coil and it stays right wherever I want it. That's where it stays. That's why I like using this type of shims. Now, we determined a while ago that there's going to be 3/4 of an inch of overhang sticking out of the top plate. Now, what I did was I took a measurement from the top of the coil right here up to the top of the former. The measurement I got was 1 inch 800 thousandths. Now, take that number and add that 3/4 of an inch to it, 750, and that'll give you the exact measurement where the coil will rest in that gap. And then you take your tool and you set it accordingly right there. That is exactly where the coil needs to rest within the gap. That puts 3/4 of an inch of coil above the top plate, 3/4 of an inch of that coil below it. Now, I take my tape, and in between the leads, I'll put a piece of tape. can double check the measurement and make sure that coil is right where it needs to be. And we are good. Alright, now with the tape in place, I can actually slide the spiders over without worrying about the coil moving. So get it down, give it a little spin so it sits flat, and we are ready for our first glue bead, actually. Okay. So you get your epoxy ready and you lay a bead around that thing. Alright. Ready for some glue. Spin. There's the first glue bead. Now you take your second spider, and this step is critical. You've got to make sure that when you put this thing in position, these lead wires line up perfectly with the lead wires on the coil. They can't be off at all. Same thing. Put it on, pressure in place, give it a little spin. I've got tape on it. Okay. Give it a little spin, holding the coil still. Give it a little spin, and that'll ensure that it sits flat on the landings. Alright. Now you've got a minute or so to work with this epoxy. It doesn't cure instantly. We're going to give that about 10 minutes to set up. This epoxy says it sets in 5 minutes. I'm not comfortable with that. I give it 10 or so. That way I can actually handle the part without damaging the joint. So, when you do this, try not to push on the center of the spider. Relax it by moving it back and forth. Okay. Just like so. Don't push down on the spider. Twist it back and forth. That'll let it sit flat on the landing and sit level around the coil. When the epoxy sets, we'll be good to go. Alright, I'll be back, people. I gotta let this sit up for a bit. Alright guys, this joint is cured. It's dry enough for me to handle without damaging the part. Now what we're gonna do is slide it out, just like so, and we're gonna lay a glue bead right around the former at the bottom. It's going to be a small bead, and I'll go back over it again. Okay. We'll let that cure for about 10 minutes like we did before, and I'll be back shortly. Alright guys, I let that bead cure, and then I went over that bead with another bead of glue, a little thicker, for a better contact surface, and I'll show it to you. Can you see that? Pretty consistent all the way around. Come out good. Alright, what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to go ahead and glue this assembly down into the basket. You just got to be careful when you do this. Make sure that you line your lead wires up with the holes in the basket for the push terminals or for direct leads, whatever you're going to do. Alright. First thing you got to do, you need to put a bead of glue between the spiders, and then also a bead of glue on the landing in the basket too. So let me get that done. When you do this step, keep the spiders level, because if you do it at an angle, the glue tends to run down into the spiders. You don't want that. So I'm going to do this real carefully. And you lay a bead of glue on the landing. Then you set it in place. Okay, we're good with the leads. Take your clamp ring, tuck it over these lead wires. Get it centered up as best you can. Alright. And you clamp it. Alright, I got the spiders clamped in place. Tensile leads lined up. We're good to go. Once it secures, I'll be able to put the cone in. And we're pretty much almost done with this thing. But I'm going to give this some cure time, 10 or 15 minutes or so, and I'll be back. Alright guys, got the solder, tensile lead soldered up, cut off the excess. It's time to put the cone in. So what I'm going to do first is lay a bead around the former, all the way around. Then I'll lay a bead around the rim here for the surround and clamp it in place. For the center, you do want a good tight joint here, so what I'm going to do is, I've got my weight down here, I'll set some weight on it to compress it and clamp it good so the joint will be secure. Around the rim. Lead wires on the spider are pretty big in diameter, so you can see that there's notches in that cone to slip right around them. the surround down first. Got a clamp ring. Put my clamps on it. Okay. Some people can take little clamps and just actually clamp the surround itself. I like using the ring because it applies uniform pressure all the way around the surround. While that's setting, got that in place. Here's the weight I talked about. Okay, and I'm going to give that some cure time, and I'll be back. Alright, this thing's been sitting here curing for about 20 minutes. I can go ahead and pull the clamps, pull the ring off, pull the weight off the cone. Good deal. Rim gasket, I'm going to go ahead and install that. It's just a matter of lining the holes up in the gasket with the holes in the frame and slip it into place. Next thing you want to do is take your epoxy and lay a pretty heavy glue bead around the bottom of the cone here in the former. Give that about 20 minutes to cure. Then put the dust cap on. We'll be done. Alright guys, got the glue bead laid around the center of the coil here, the bottom of the cone. I went ahead and laid a second glue bead just for strength purposes, and also laid some glue on the tensor leads just to keep them in place, keep them from moving. And the last step, put the dust cap on, and that's what I'm fixing to do. Put a piece of tape on the cap, sort of act as a handle where I can hold it. Lay it in place and give it a spin where it sits nice and flat on the cone. This particular cone has an indention in it for the dust cap. You just buy the right size and lay it in place. Set a little weight on it. There we go. I'm going to let that cure for about 15 minutes or so, and we have a complete woofer. Alright man, dust cap's been curing for about 15 minutes. Pull the weight off of it. And we now have a complete woofer. It's ready to go. minus the lead wires. I didn't show you this step simply because it's just a matter of deciding what you want to do, direct leads or binding posts. If you do direct leads, it's just a matter of soldering them up to the lead wires. If you do binding posts, it's just a matter of installing the binding posts and soldering the lead wires to them, and that's pretty much it. One complete woofer. There's actually a pair in this set. I'm going to do direct leads on this because the gentleman I'm building these for, that's what he requested. Now, these are only 1500 watt RMS each. Probably don't need direct leads, but that's what he wanted, so that's what I'm going to do. There we go, people. Nice woofer. Alright guys, y'all just got to watch me build a woofer from start to finish. I hope you liked the video, and I hope you learned from it. If you're an audio guy of any kind, this is a project you'll definitely want to try. And I've had a blast with it personally, and these won't be the only ones I build. I'll build more in the future, and if you want to see more videos, let me know, and I'll make them, no problem. So with that said, I want to shout out to a guy real quick, Mr. Craig Swears. He owns a company called Subwooferparts.com. This is where I've got a lot of my parts from. This man's got parts galore. Anything you need, from coil, spiders, frames, motors, tensor leads, binding posts, adhesives, whatever you need, he's got it. And if you can't find what you're looking for, hit him up, because chances are he can probably get it. Craig, if you watched the video, man, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and your patience. I know I ask a lot of questions, but I want to learn how to do it right and do it right the first time. And this guy's helped me with that for real. So also Paul Pierce Audio Products is another guy that's helped me along the way. Paul, if you watched the video, man, I greatly appreciate your time and your patience. So with that said, man, Mr. CMD, I'm going to get out of here. Like up the video, hit up my YouTube channel, subscribe, like me on Facebook. And that's all I got. Till next time, Mr. CMD, I'm gone.